And it was when I think I turned 29. And so that meant I was turning 30 the next year. And at the time it felt very significant. And it felt like, we can put all these ideas on different numbers and different ages. And in this case, it was very helpful because I went, okay, like you're going to turn 30. If you don't do this, when are you going to do this? Are you just going to keep thinking about it and having it be this idea that you never actually make a reality? And I think that was honestly what gave me that push to be like, if you don't do this now, when? So just do it and kind of take that action. That was kind of the little push that got me to actually book my flights, get my gear, and make it happen.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries, or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Sheelagh Daly. Sheilagh's first long-distance bicycle journey saw her set off solo across Europe. It was a goal that was many years in the making. Up until this point, Sheelagh had never travelled solo, yet alone undertaken any bicycle travel. But undeterred, in 2019, she boarded a one-way flight to Edinburgh and set off. 3.5 months later, she'd arrive in Croatia. This journey taught Sheelagh so much about herself, as only long trips travelling alone can do. She'd experienced so many different cultures, seen so many varied landscapes, and gone through all the emotional ups and downs. But by the end of that adventure, it was safe to say Sheelagh had become totally hooked on bike travel. Since taking that first journey across Europe, Sheelagh has embarked on many other bike adventures, sometimes solo and sometimes also with her partner. She began working at a bike store and now has also channeled what it was like to be a complete beginner and novice setting out on this path in a spirit of sharing her experiences with others with a view to answering their questions and helping them to undertake their own slow travel journeys on a bike. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Sheelagh today, learning more about her story and hearing her recount her experiences from all these many bike adventures which she's taken so far. Sheelagh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to speak with you, Sheelagh. I think we're going to have some amazing, great stories that you're going to tell us about, and I'm going to probably have a lot of laughter along the way too. I just get that feel. But Sheelagh, a question which I start my show with, and I ask it to all my guests is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I love this question so much. I don't remember the specific bike, but I very much remember the experience. Because my sister, who was 4 years older, so I would have been 6 or 7, she would have been around 10 or 11, she was tasked with teaching me how to ride a bike. We lived in kind of suburbs, so if you can picture it, there's like a sidewalk and then a lawn of grass. So that would be like, 8 meters and then 5 or 6 meters of pavement as a driveway. So it'd go like lawn, driveway, lawn, driveway. And I was so scared of falling that I would get off my bike at every driveway and push the length of the driveway and then get back on my bike for every lawn and ride my bike when the lawn was there. And I did this the whole length of the street. So I must have repeated this like 8 times before my sister was like, Sheelagh, you can't ride a bike this way. And she stormed home. And I was left there at the end of the street, and I was still so scared that I just continued the whole way back, getting off every 6 or 8 meters, pushing my bike, getting back on. So I came from very humble beginnings in terms of bike confidence and skill level. Yeah, but eventually, I don't remember when I decided I would also bike the length of the driveway, but eventually I did.
Oh my gosh, I love so much about this story. There's a few things that have just come in my mind straight away. The first one is, as an Aussie, just learning how everybody else describes what the typical area in front of a suburban house is like. So that grassed area in Australia, we call it the front nature strip. So the nature strip is what it's called.
That's lovely.
So yeah, we would have the footpath, or as you call a sidewalk, and then the front nature strip, and then the driveway. But the other thing I was thinking, I, as a child, Sheelagh, had an overprotective mum, and she would only let me ride my bike on that front nature strip, on that front strip of grass. So I was only allowed to ride there, and I hated it because it made me go so slow. And so it's sort of like you and me in reverse. And then the next thing I thought of was, it was almost like you were doing your own little child's version of cyclocross, but in reverse. So, in cyclocross races, they ride the easy stuff and then they hike a bike. And it was sort of like you were doing that in reverse. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You obviously learnt how to ride a bike eventually. And, bike travels have been a part of your life now, really in a major way for the last few years. But it wasn't always this way. I'd love to know, what were your early adventures growing up actually like, and what sort of things did you used to do?
Oh, I was lucky enough to be exposed to a lot of different outdoor activities as a kid. Like I went to summer camp and I got to try like kayaking and canoeing and swimming. And so I definitely got exposed to outdoor adventures as a kid. We even got to do like an overnight canoe trip. When I was like 11, we went and canoed out as a cabin and slept in tents and stuff. So,
oh my gosh, awesome.
Yeah.
That would have just been mega. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like an Ontario thing. Yeah, here in Ontario and Canada, there's like overnight summer camps. And I was lucky enough to go to one where, yeah, you get to go and try canoe tripping for the first time. That was great exposure. But the funny thing is, I was really more of like a creative kid. My preference was definitely to be indoors, like making up skits or dancing or writing or reading. So my love for the outdoors and adventures really didn't come until I was an adult. As like a kid and a teenager, I was really into theater and acting, and I was really focused on those creative activities. So I didn't really fall in love with biking and outdoor adventures until I was an adult.
So that was really your outlet for creativity, was sort of acting and drama and stuff like that?
Yeah. I was so in love with theater. I really wanted to work as an actor. So that was my big like passion. And yeah, I actually didn't get into biking until I was 18. And I was actually, as I was kind of in theater school and working as an actor, it can be really overwhelming. You're auditioning a lot and you get feedback on your body and your appearance, and you feel like you're never good enough physically or good enough for a role. So when I was 18, it was suggested to me to try doing a triathlon, and I started training for triathlons, and I found that so hugely helpful because it meant that in this world, even though obviously I loved acting, but in this world where you're often waiting for kind of permission from other people and you're feeling like you're never good enough and that your body isn't good enough, especially, being a woman growing up, your body's constantly scrutinized. And so having this external thing where, I could go to an audition and maybe I wouldn't get it, or I could be in an acting class and I didn't feel like I was good enough, but then I could go and do this bike ride or this run and be like, wow, like look at what my body is capable of. It really took that pressure off how I felt like my body needed to be for society, and just let me be really proud of what it could do on its own.
Being able to find an outlet to prove to yourself that actually you can do some pretty awesome stuff. How awesome is it that you found that? Did you do many triathlons?
I did actually, yeah. So I started, I think when I was around 18. And although I really loved triathlons, I liked training, I realized pretty quickly that I didn't care about going fast. So like a lot of people when they're racing, right, the challenge is to train yourself to go faster. And I just didn't have that interest. I liked going at my own pace. And so that meant that I kept kind of just increasing the distance because I just wanted to see kind of like what I could do. But I didn't like the feeling of pushing myself to go faster. So I just kept going longer. And I kind of worked my way all the way up to doing an Ironman distance, which is like a 3.8 kilometer swim.
Ironman's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a 180-kilometer bike ride
Yeah.
and a marathon.
Yeah. So I worked my way up to that and was so proud that I accomplished that. Then once I did that, I was like, okay, that's enough of that. I don't think I want to keep training in that regard anymore. And then I think not too long after that is when I started kind of getting these inklings of going out on a bike adventure. And I think triathlons really gave me some of the confidence because even though I had never traveled solo, I had never bike toured or anything like that, I knew that I could do these long distances. That was kind of helpful in giving me that confidence for sure.
Because it gave you that confidence in that sort of physical endurance capability. Like the idea of pedaling for hours wasn't so much of a concern because you knew that you could do that really fatigued. Like if you can do an Ironman, you can certainly do, bike travel. You could, and especially with the mindset you were talking about, you weren't so much concerned about going faster, but further. Like I feel like this is a happy coming together of finding bike travel as well. And not to say that bike travel has to be about long distances. Many people take bike adventures in many different forms, but often the thing that bike travel is about is many hours a day just riding your bike, not necessarily at high speeds, but you're still sitting on a saddle for often, over 5 hours for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which day in, day out builds up. There's one thing to be piquing your interest with, the Ironman side and the actual physical capability of riding a bike, but the idea to then strap stuff to a bike and go and explore places. Were you someone who was adventurous from a travel mindset? Do you have a curious mindset in terms of discovering countries and places, just in general, not on a bike?
Not originally.
Wow.
Yeah. So originally I was so focused on working as an actor. And to work as an actor, you really have to be local because you have to be available to audition. You have to be available for like the run of a production. So it was really built into me this fear of traveling. I was like, I can't leave the city. I was like so really focused on that dream. And I had a couple travel experiences, always motivated by somebody else. Like my sister or a friend would be like, I'm going to go here. Do you want to come? And I would come and I would have an incredible time. But I didn't really have that motivation within me to make travel happen on my own when I was focused on acting. It wasn't until I started transitioning away from acting that all of a sudden I remember one day just being like, oh, hey, like if I don't have to be in the city all the time, I could be anywhere. And then that's when my first little my kernel of an idea was that I have a Scottish heritage. I grew up with a lot of Scottish traditions. And so I thought, well, how cool would that be to explore Scotland? But I knew I had to do it on a budget. And I had one time gone backpacking with my sister, and I hated carrying a backpack. I felt like, of course, I was also like 19 or something, so I packed way too much. Like now I'm more interested in trying through hiking and stuff, so I would probably do things differently. But at the time, I really didn't like this experience of like carrying all my stuff on my back and going from like the train to the hostel and that kind of thing. I had family members who had done bike touring, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool because that could be like more budget friendly. I don't have to pay for trains or buses or taxis. I don't have to even pay for like hostels or hotels. I can stay in a tent. So that kind of idea started percolating, just thinking about Scotland, thinking about it being an adventure that would be there. And then I also have Irish heritage. So I was like, maybe while I'm over there, I'll just also do Ireland. And then I had a friend who was saying he wanted to hitchhike across Europe. And somewhere in my brain was just like, well, I should just bike across Europe. And then that became the thing in my head. I was just like, I want to bike across Europe. But I thought about it for years before I actually went ahead and did it. But that's how that idea kind of slowly percolated into my brain.
You know how you said it took you years before you actually got over to Europe and actually did it? What were you doing in that time? Because, and the reason I ask that is sometimes people set a goal and it's that far off thing that I'd love to do that one day. But then there's also setting a goal and actually sort of taking the little steps towards actually making it a reality. So, it took you years to do this thing that you'd thought about. In that time frame, what were you doing? Were you sort of speaking it into existence slowly but surely? Were you researching stuff, or was it just, if the stars align, I'd love to do that one day?
Oh, what an important question. Yeah, it was definitely, I think it started as like an escapist thought, as like I'm working away through my days. I enjoyed my job, but I was just thinking of having this kind of adventure. And it was very much when you have a bad day, being like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here and bike across Europe. It felt like it was in that place of just kind of dreaming, not taking much action. And it was when I think I turned 29. And so that meant I was turning 30 the next year. And at the time, it felt very significant. And it felt like, we can put all these ideas on different numbers and different ages. And in this case, it was very helpful because I went, okay, like you're going to turn 30. If you don't do this, when are you going to do this? Are you just going to keep thinking about it and having it be this idea that you never actually make a reality? And I think that was honestly what gave me that push to be like, if you don't do this now, when? So just do it and kind of take that action. That was kind of the little push that got me to actually book my flights, get my gear, and make it happen.
So at what point did you get your bike? Did you use the bike that you use in your triathlons, or did you get a bike specific for bike travel? And the reason I ask this is there's so many people that I know listen to this show have ideas of taking that one trip, and it's percolating slowly, and everyone has a different way of building up to it. And I'd love to know how you prepared to even know. I guess another way of saying it, so many people feel almost defeated before they start because they don't know where to start. What equipment do I need to buy? Which bike do I need to buy? How fit do I need to be? How am I going to figure out where to go? It's easy enough as for those of us who've done this before to say, don't worry about that and all not. But when you're a complete novice, that can be overwhelming. How did you figure out the answers to those sort of puzzle pieces as well?
Yeah. Well, I was very lucky in that I had family members who had done it. That was hugely helpful. I was actually able to borrow the first bike I took. And then in terms of the gear, that I got a lot secondhand. I kind of used what I had. I definitely didn't have like a big budget for it. So I kind of cobbled things together. But over the years, I've, improved everything, and as things wear out, I get new gear. But a lot of the gear I took on that first tour, it was borrowed, it was secondhand, it was stuff I already had. And anything that I bought like a cheaper version because I couldn't get the bigger stuff. So yeah, at that point, it was really just about getting started. And the bike was a huge benefit. I will say, like, the bike, looking back, in many ways wasn't ideal for touring.
What bike was it?
It was actually a cyclocross bike. So it was a bike that's designed for racing on varied terrain. So it's great in the sense that if you're doing a supported tour or you're kind of on a bunch of terrain, it's really great. But it's built to go fast. And so it's not very stable. So when you're me and you've brought whenever you cobble it together and it weighs, 50, 55 pounds and you throw it all on the bike, it's incredibly unstable. And it had rim brakes in the drop bars. So it was really hard to brake well going downhill with that much weight on my bike. And didn't have much of a granny gear at all. So hills, I was just inching up. But none of that mattered. And that's why often what I'll say when people are wondering about what bike to get is I'm what's most important. I love the expression, the best bike is the one you have. As long as...
Sorry, for listeners, the benefit of Sheilagh's probably just seen my face because I love that too. But I say yes, but sometimes the bike you have isn't going to be the best bike as well.
Yeah.
I for a couple of years commuted with, I called her Maureen the Townie. She was a Dutch bike gazelle. She weighed like 23 kilos and had 3 gears. Look, I could probably put stuff in her basket and go a few places, but my gosh, I probably would have had a miserable time as well.
That's true. That's true.
And I'm going to have a listener tell me they've done that and they didn't. So power to you. But yeah, keep going. Sorry.
No, I think it's true. But I think sometimes trying to take some of those barriers out, I think it's like important that the bike be safe, that it be comfortable to ride. I think in terms of, I think sometimes the bikepacking world can get overwhelming in terms of like titanium, carbon, all these fancy things that we need or don't need. And sometimes there can be a simpler bike that can get the job done. And the bike I took wasn't perfect, but it did get me out there. And from that experience, I learned what I wanted in a touring bike. And then I went and kind of like invested in it a couple of years later when I was like ready to.
What bike did you end up getting? What's your touring bike now?
Well, so then after that, it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So I just bought a random gravel bike that was available and kind of modified it. But then since I went ahead and now that I work in a bike shop, I custom built a Surly Bridge Club. When I started out, I wouldn't have known that was the right bike for me because it wasn't until I started touring that I was like, oh, I don't want to be on pavement as much. I want to be on rougher roads and I want to be more remote and I want to be able to kind of quote unquote toss my bike around and not worry about it so much. That meant that I need thicker tires and I need a sturdier frame and all these things that I wouldn't have known starting out. And for me personally, would have been too overwhelming to try to research. It was helpful to just kind of get going. And then over the years, I figured out what I kind of wanted in a bike.
You know how you were saying you were finding what you needed and a lot of it was secondhand and other things you bought the cheaper version because that's what you could afford. But my gosh, you crossed Europe with that and you might even still have some of the stuff you use there and still use now. It reminded me of, listeners, it was actually episode number 1, the amazing story of Madeline Hoffman, German living in Sydney. She took a trip, her very first trip, never bike toured before either. And she went from Germany to meet her paternal father in Turkey. But all of her stuff was secondhand. And it did her amazingly well. Our episode finished when she got to Turkey, but Madeline took an amazing journey back home to Australia through the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, India, I think, Thailand, and Philippines. Anyway, that's a side note. But her bike was a secondhand bike from another guest, believe it or not, which I found out like how many episodes later. I randomly was interviewing Simon and Laura, who were on a world tour. And it came up that used to be Simon's bike. And, now it's Madeline's bike. And I think the secondhand idea is just such a brilliant one for bike travel as well.
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting out. You mentioned what bike you have now. You wouldn't have known it was the bike you needed then. But you do need something that gets you started.
Yeah, totally. And I think the other thing too is being aware, like you said, some bikes can be harder to ride. And you can have like a bit of that awareness if you're like, something doesn't feel quite comfortable or feels hard, then like, yeah, maybe down the road you can switch it if you feel like you need to. But yeah, I'm so happy. I love following her journey. Yeah, I'm so glad that she got started too.
Hi, Madeline, if you're listening, just to close out on this chapter. She now works at I think it's a not-for-profit in Australia, which helps people out selling secondhand bikes. So there you go.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's a full circle loop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Back to your story, Sheelagh. I can now understand you've had the goal, you started making it happen. 2019, you buy yourself a one-way ticket to Edinburgh. I want to know, though, as a total beginner, other than the idea of I'm going to go to Scotland and maybe to Ireland and then I'm going to cross Europe, how do you actually make the day-to-day reality of a journey that big? Cobble it together? Like, how did you get a route together? What were the milestones you were looking forward to? How did you not overwhelm yourself with the fact that you were crossing so many countries in that time frame? Because I think as a true beginner, perhaps having a goal that can be that big can also feel too overwhelming to take on. So what was that like in the lead up to it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I love that on the podcast you said that you feel like you're an anxious person. And I'm very much an anxious person as well. So I was so anxious about heading out. Every fear I thought of, and I even like before I left, my family doesn't even know this is what I was doing, but I was so certain that I was going to die that I went on like a little tour to visit my family because I was like, oh, I should make sure I see everyone in case I go rolling off a cliff.
Whoa.
That's how anxious I was.
It's like you're preparing your last visits before you go.
Yeah. So I went to see my grandparents and see my sisters and see my parents. And I was like, if this is it, I should make sure I've said goodbye to everyone. That's how anxious I was. But I think what really helped me was I gave myself complete permission to quit. And so I was like, okay, you've bought the ticket. Like you've taken a lot of steps. I had, gotten rid of my apartment. I'd done a bunch of things. But I was like, if you get over there and a week in, you decide this isn't for you, you can come home. You can switch to backpacking. You can work in a hostel. You can go somewhere else. Like there are so many options. Don't stress about this sense of like, I have to do this. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And I think that gave me a lot of permission personally, because it meant that every day that I chose to do it, it was because I wanted to do it, not because I was forcing myself. It was because I always knew if you want to go home, you can go home. And then that little voice in me would be like, I think I still want to keep going. So I guess I'll keep going. So that was hugely helpful. And then I didn't realize this is what I was doing at the time, but because I'm somebody that's prone to overwhelm, and I knew I was like, if I get overwhelmed, I'm just going to be done. I'm going to be out. It's going to be like too much for me. What I did was I went to Scotland where I speak the language. I have some cultural traditions that were the same. They have a good amount of cycling infrastructure. They have a good amount of resources, like in terms of groceries, bike shops, that kind of thing.
They have some awesome, friendly people too. Hello to my Scottish friends. You know who you are. I love you.
Yeah. Wild camping is legal there. So it was like so many things that I could be worried about, I took out. So then it was literally just get yourself from point to point. And then also, Scotland's a place that I found had a ton of warm showers hosts. So I was able to kind of stay with a warm showers host before I started, and then on my second and third night too, to kind of like before I was ready to camp, I was like staying with friendly cyclists. And then I layered in camping, and then I started camping more. And then I went over to the Netherlands where I didn't speak the language, but there's a ton of cycling infrastructure. And then I slowly worked my way towards places where there wasn't as much cycling infrastructure and I didn't speak the language, and the resources were further apart, and, there weren't as many campgrounds and that kind of thing. For me, that really helped take out that risk of overwhelm, because it was like I wasn't layering in the next thing until I had like conquered all the first things.
It's almost like you've created like a stepping stone bicycle tour. Or, if I was to take you back to like playing a video game as a child, it's sort of like you're getting through the levels before you're progressing to the next one. And each one, that extra experience you've taken from advancing helps you to learn the next thing that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I really, really love that idea. How did that work in reality for you?
So well. I feel like I almost never got overwhelmed. I think I really just tried to trust my gut and listen to myself. And I think it helps being somewhere like Scotland or like many parts of Europe where you have options. So it was very helpful that it was like, if there was a night where I was like, I'm going to wild camp tonight. And then I was like, I can't find anywhere. I don't feel very like good here. I don't feel totally safe. It's like, okay, well, there's a hostel 8 kilometers away. So why don't we go there tonight? And then you'll try wild camping again tomorrow. It was super slow and I rarely felt overwhelmed. And in the times where I felt like I was having a couple bad days in a row, I would always just try to be very kind to myself and to be like, okay, like what do you want to do with this feeling and this information? Like, do you want to go to the next town and fly home? Do you want to fly back to Edinburgh? Do you want to work in like a workaway or a woofing type like place for a few days or a week and see how that feels? For myself, like it's always just coming with like curiosity and kindness and just being like, okay, where's that coming from? Because I know like I can think of one time when I did my big loop of Scotland and then I got over to the Netherlands and I just felt like there was a few days where I just felt like I wasn't having fun. I felt just kind of overwhelmed and sad. And I was like, do I even want to do this? Do I like doing this? What's going on? And I gave myself that permission. I was like, you can go to the next town. You can fly home. You got options. And I thought about it more and I was like, oh, I think what's going on is that in Scotland, because I spoke the same language, I was so comfortable talking to people and having these like little interactions in my day, just being like, oh, where's the grocery store? Or people would say hi and I would chat with them. And it's not at all that there's plenty of Dutch people that speak English. But it was just within me, I felt so embarrassed that I didn't speak their language, that I was kind of holding myself back and I was trying to figure out everything on my own. And I realized that I didn't need to do that and I could actually still have these lovely connections and, you know, mime with people and gesture to people and just say hi, and learn a few words of their language and communicate the best I could. But I think it was by giving myself that curiosity and gentleness that works for me rather than being like, no, you committed to this. You have months. You have to make it to the other side of Europe. It was just like, you want to stop. And then my brain's like, I guess I don't want to stop. I guess I'll keep going.
I really love that idea that you gave yourself permission at any point to, no, well, let's call time on this as well. I want you to take me back to Scotland, though, and I want you to take me back to your very first wild camping experience because I want to know what it was actually like when you did do the thing that could overwhelm many of us and what it was like to pitch up solo and actually be in that moment as well. Was it a serene moment? Was it an anxious moment? How did that night go?
Yeah. I mean, the first time I wild camped, so I went down like a side road. I found this little spot by a ravine and I found this little flat spot and I was like, oh, well, this is great. This little flat spot. I have some water nearby. This is perfect. And I remember I had talked to, I'd been lucky enough to be connected with a solo female bike tourer who I had talked to. And she had said she just always makes sure that people don't see her leaving the road. And she makes sure that she's not visible from the road and that nobody sees her kind of going off somewhere. So I had gone, I waited till there was no cars. I got off. And even though wild camping is legal in Scotland, and I learned you can find a lot of side roads, a lot of the main roads, even though there's tons of forest, you can't really access them because there'll be like a ditch or a wall or something. And so this is like the best spot I found. And I was like, okay, this feels really nice. And I set up my tent. I'm like all ready to go. And then a man walks by with his dog. And of course, it was flat because it was next to a walking path by a ravine. But I hadn't put two and two together. I thought I was a genius. I found a flat spot by the water. I was thrilled with myself. And so I had this whole dialogue with myself that I was like, okay, now this person has seen me. They've seen that I'm alone at this camp, like by the water. In the moment, it felt too overwhelming to like pack things back up and head out. I was like, you know what? I think I feel okay enough here. And I actually got a very good sleep that night, shockingly, and definitely woke up with this, sense of confidence. But wild camping solo is something I still work on to this day, honestly. I feel quite confident and comfortable wild camping with my partner. But on my own, I find I'll very easily, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to wild camp tonight. And then I'll just get a little spooked and I'm like, oh, you know what? There's a hostel there, or there's a campground here. And especially in Europe where like you could literally bike past a campground and it's like 10 euros or something. And it's like, oh, well, you know what? I'll just pop in here. I want to get to the point that I view it as comfortably as I view campgrounds or warm showers or hostels or anything like that. And I've actually thought about like giving myself a little challenge of like going out and like challenging myself to wild camp like 3 days in a row or 5 days in a row to just push past that barrier, because I've done it and I know I can do it. And I know that for the most part, I actually very much enjoy it. But at the end of the night, just, you know, when there's that chill in the air and the sun is going down and I'm alone and with every anxious thought I could possibly think of, I think I need more like reps in to get myself really comfortable doing it on my own.
It's funny, Sheelagh, I feel you and I seem to have the same sort of challenges. It's a sort of goal that I'm setting myself, and I'm really torn about it because, Sheelagh and listeners as well, I love bike travel. I love doing it, and overwhelming majority of bike travel I've ever done has been with my husband, and I actually really enjoy doing bike adventures with my husband as well. Like he is my best friend, and so it's one of those things I've learnt on this show. When people take solo travel, they love their solo travel, and overwhelmingly the times where they don't want to be on their own is when they've experienced something amazing and they ultimately want to share it straight away with someone. And so I'm torn because I want to motivate myself to go on a solo journey, to solo wild camp, but also I'm not sure if I actually really do, because I am pretty comfortable with being the person that really enjoys taking non-solo bike adventures.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about bike touring, right? Is like there's as many ways to bike tour as there are people who do it.
No one's is right.
Exactly. And there's something special about every way that we do it. So if it will feel like a fun challenge for you, then I think it's awesome. And if you love riding with your partner or staying in campgrounds, I think that's awesome too.
Did you find during that journey across Europe that you were self-aware enough to realize that you were gaining confidence with bike travel as well?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that was why it feels like such a memorable part of my life and one of the most memorable tours I've done because of all those just kind of lightning bolt moments. I think coming from, I guess, just, you know, being a woman growing up in the world, having my brain that is more anxious and more self-doubting and all these things. And, you know, coming from an acting background that has its own kind of criticisms and challenges, and just going out there and doing this thing that the year before I did it or the day before I did it, I would never have thought I could do it. You know, it really seemed to me like when I heard stories of people that did it, even though it was very hard to find stories of women who were solo female bike touring, it felt like at the time. When I did hear it, they just felt superhuman. They seemed fearless. They seemed just like these incredible people that were so far away from where I felt like my brain space was. And so when I looked back at the end of that trip, I was kind of just in disbelief that it was something that I had done.
Do you think about that now? Do you reflect back on that trip still with a sense of disbelief that you had done it?
That's a lovely question. I guess I definitely found when I got back from that trip that I carried that confidence through a lot of situations. I think there's something about the self-reliance of a long solo bike tour like that. The fact that there was a lot of times in my life that I would seek information from other people. Like when I wasn't sure about what to do about something, I would ask my mom and my sister and my friend and to try to decide what to do. And I remember this one moment in Slovenia where I was on a route and I was about to go into this forest and I heard gunshots. And gunshots are so jarring, especially when you're in the middle of nowhere, you're on your own. And I heard gunshots and I felt this panic set in, couldn't think clearly. My brain was just like, my body was shaking. And I just remember taking these deep breaths and slowing my heart and being like, okay, if you want to panic, you can have a second, but ultimately you need to make this decision. You need to figure out how to get yourself to safety. You need to decide what happens next. And, I looked around and I found this sign. And so actually first in my thoughts, I opened Google and I was like, guns in Slovenia. Is there something going on in Slovenia I don't know about? And then I was like, okay, think about the fact that it's probably the simplest solution is usually the actual answer. And I was like, it's probably hunting. It's a forest. They're probably hunting. And I found a sign and it was in Slovenian, obviously. And I put it into Google Translate to English. And it was just a shooting range for hunting. And I was like, okay, do you want to go through that on this route that's selected? No, probably not. So we'll find another route. And I rerouted and carried on. And it's moments like that were so self-assuring because it was like you have the tools within you to calm yourself, to get yourself through these challenging situations. And there was this huge fear heading out that I would come to some harm and that, it would feel like it was my fault, that I was crazy for being out here doing this on my own. And it was so self-assuring in those moments to be like, oh no, I can take care of myself. I can, get myself to safety. I can make decisions in the moment and I can do all of this on my own. I can do everything on my own. It was very, very empowering.
And it must be really empowering to this day as well, because you've got so much that you can reflect on now and so many experiences where you go, well, when this happened, I did this, or, oh, I've been in that situation before and I got through it. Or even if it's something totally unique, being able to reflect on the fact that, well, I went on a bike tour, which is a problem-solving tour, and I solved all those problems, and so I can solve this one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely a confidence that carries with you.
I wonder, so it was a shooting range in Slovenia. I would so not go through that zone. Yeah. I didn't realize until we moved to France that hunting here is a big thing, and the hunting season's 6 months of the year.
Right.
Yeah, and there's signs saying, hunting is going on now. Stay vigilant. And I'm like, me stay vigilant? How about no one shoot me?
Yeah, exactly. What am I supposed to do about it?
I want to take you then to unexpected moments because, when we were talking about things that don't go to plan, this was not in the guidebook, this is not in my thoughts and my visions. Hunting in Slovenia is one thing, but I want you to take me to an unexpected moment that occurred on your tour that totally stopped you in your tracks for good or bad reasons. It could be something unexpected that was amazing as well. But I often feel tours are full of unexpected moments. And I'd like you to take me to something that occurred and how you dealt with that as well. Hey listeners, if you're loving the stories and adventures I'm bringing to you each week, consider supporting Seek Travel Ride by buying me a coffee. Your donation helps me keep the show going strong and bringing you even more inspiring content from our guests. Just head over to the Seek Travel Ride Buy Me a Coffee page. Every little bit helps and is deeply appreciated. Plus, it's a great way to show your love for Seek Travel Ride. I've included a link in the show notes. Thanks so much for being part of our community and for your support. Okay, now back to the show.
Oh, well, actually coming back to wild camping, one of the times that I wild camped, I was, again, because somebody had said, make sure nobody sees you get off the road. I had been biking with this kind of forest next to me, and I was like, okay, that would be a pretty good forest. And I was biking along, but there's always cars next to me, and I was like, okay, I can't stop now. And finally, there was this opening. And so I got off the road, and it kind of went down into a ditch, and I could hear this car coming, and I just threw my bike into the ditch and ran into the forest because I didn't want them to see me. And in doing so, I broke my rack.
I'm just picturing this.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, it was a full shove. I just threw all my belongings and my bike, everything. I shoved it into the forest. It fell into the ditch and the rack broke. And again, this is the whole thing of you don't know what you don't know until it happens, right? So when I had borrowed this bike, my mom had taken it on a tour, but she had done a supported tour. The bike had it had been on a lot of tough terrain, different conditions, but had never carried a lot of gear. And so this rack, it turns out, I think it was rated for like 20 pounds, and I had like 50 on it. So of course it broke. I was like, okay, well, you're going to have to deal with that problem in the morning. And so I went into the forest, I set up camp, and I actually had a great time wild camping. I felt so hidden, so comfortable. It was this beautiful experience wild camping that really made me fall in love with wild camping. But then the next day, I had to deal with this broken rack and zip ties to the rescue, obviously.
Yay! Always pack zip ties.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of like held it together as best I could with zip ties. I got the bags on. Luckily, it was only one side that had cracked. And so I had it held to the other of the zip ties. And I was like, you know what? If I don't go over anything too rough, I think it's all going to hold together. And just took it easy until I could get to a bike shop. And, eventually a bit ahead did get to a bike shop and got it all sorted. But it's, again, one of those moments, right, where like we don't know what we don't know until we have to encounter it. And then we do our best to handle it as well as we can.
It's something that's come up as a theme with many of my other guests. And some of my guests actually use it as their own mantra of you always find a way, we always work it out. And it's true, isn't it? Like, I'm not saying you want to have problems, but somehow you find the answers to them and the solutions to them as well. Did you come across a lot of other bike tourers on this journey?
So many. Yeah. And I think that's maybe one of like the extra beautiful things about bike touring solo is I just ended up being adopted by so many people along the way. So I set off solo, but there was a couple little short rides in Scotland where somebody would be going in the same direction and be like, oh, we'll just ride together for a bit. But then actually when I was in Brussels in Belgium, I was staying with a Warm Showers host, and she was like, hey, me and some friends are riding to Berlin in a couple of days. Do you want to come with? And at first I had been planning to go into Switzerland. So I was like, no, my plan is to go to Switzerland. Thank you so much. And then I slept on it and I woke up and I was like, that's stupid. You should go with the cool new friends that on this, like, you've been riding solo for a good, I forget, like a month and a half or 2 months at that point, like go on this different adventure. So I rode with them all across Germany to Berlin, which was also super cool because I was riding with people that were from Belgium or from Germany. And so like hearing their stories of growing up in Germany, and that was an amazing experience. And then I met a couple guys in the Czech Republic and rode with them for a few days. And then I met a girl in Croatia who was also doing a solo bike tour. And I met her in a hostel and we rode together for like a week and a half or 2 weeks. So yeah, even though I set off to do it solo and was so scared to start, I ended up meeting people and all often at like the perfect time where I was like, you know what, I could use some more like social time. And then I'd run into somebody and I was like, this could not be more perfect.
That's a great thing too, isn't it? You expand your friendship circle. And also you end up learning so much more through their experiences and their journeys and them about people, because invariably you're meeting someone who's from a totally different country as well. So you're learning about them, which is fantastic as well and totally unexpected too.
Yeah, totally unexpected. And I have found too, like by staying, like there is a way to, it's unexpected, but there is a way, I think, a way to kind of worm more of those experiences in if you need them. Like I found often, staying in hostels or staying with Warm Showers hosts, or just being open to people that I met on the roads and having chats, you just end up, connecting with amazing people and sometimes even sharing part of your journeys together, which is so special.
Now, Sheelagh, your journey on this 3.5 month tour ended in Croatia. I imagine you had amazing experiences in Croatia, but Croatia also tested you a bit as well. I came across a post of yours and you said, the quote I came up with was, time and time again, I find the most challenging sections of my tour to lead to the most beautiful moments, and Croatia has been absolutely no exception. I want you to tell me about what was it about Croatia that was challenging, and what did it lead you to? Why did it become so beautiful at the same time?
Oh, wow. Yeah, Croatia is gorgeous. Stunning coast, big mountains, clear waters, absolutely beautiful. But it was certainly the place with the least cycling infrastructure after going through a lot of Europe. And I think also throughout Europe, kind of pinpointing little bike routes that I could take kind of thing. So it was the first time that I didn't have that cycling infrastructure. And because I wanted to follow the coast, there's so much beauty along the coast. But because there's no cycling infrastructure, your options are kind of either to take the coast road, which has a very narrow shoulder and just cars kind of like whipping past you, trucks whipping past you, or to kind of go off into more central. And it means you're doing more climbing and descending, but you're away from the traffic. And so that was what I decided to do. And I should say too, getting into Croatia was my first time dealing with like a more real border crossing. Because a lot of Europe, I was in the Schengen zone and I got so comfortable, just like I'd cross the border and my phone would ping and be like, you're in the Czech Republic now. And I'd be like, cool, and keep biking. And this was the first time when I got to Croatia that I had a super long, challenging day. It was also the day with the gunshots. And I got to the border and they were like, oh, this is only for EU passports. You can't cross here. You have to go. There's one like 14 kilometers away. I had to backtrack.
Was it up a hill?
Up a hill.
It's always up a hill.
Always.
It's like a church. It's always on the top of the hill, right?
It's always. I had to go backtrack uphill. I got chased by a dog. It was my first time getting chased by a dog. Yeah. And now that I've bike packed in Turkey, I know how to deal with dogs better. But at the time, I was like, just get away from it, and just like biked as fast as I could. And then eventually got into Croatia. And my hostel that night was at the top of one of those old, beautiful fortress towns, which is beautiful. But at 7:00 at night, when you're climbing up it after a long day, it's pretty tiring. That was my introduction into Croatia. But yeah, I ended up finding these beautiful back roads where just going through small towns and just open expanses. And it was absolutely beautiful to have these quiet moments. And then I would end up back at the coast and get to experience that beautiful coast. And Croatia has so many well-maintained, cities and buildings. And so there's so much history to be found there. So I would kind of do these beautiful walking tours and experience the city and then kind of disappear back into the quiet bush. And that was really special. And I remember there was one night where I was biking with the girl I had met and it just got late and she was more comfortable biking at night than I was. And we got separated. I saw this like mom and a child get out of their car at their house. And I was like, okay, if I can't make it any further, like I could maybe go back to them and ask if I could stay, like if I could set up my tent. And I did. I went back to them. I got to a main road and I was like, that's too dangerous. So I went back and they were so sweet. And they were like, it's cold out. You're not sleeping in your tent. Like stay in our guest room. And it was the son's birthday and they gave me some of the birthday cake and just
great.
Right. It was just like so beautiful and special. And so I felt like in Croatia, I had all these really heartwarming moments. And it was kind of my next step into kind of having less of those resources and challenging myself, but also having so much beauty and so much kindness.
Yeah. And what a country to end your journey on. Like when you came to the end of that journey, how did that feel? Did you feel proud and accomplished? Was it bittersweet? The trip was coming to an end. Like, did you want it to end? Because I feel there's a bit of both sometimes. Sometimes you're happy and you're done, and sometimes you're like, I never want this ever to end. Which one were you?
Oh, I guess somewhere in the middle. So my destination had always been Croatia, But I was like a little open-ended. So I was like, I could continue going. The girl I was riding with was actually going to continue on. And I was definitely excited. The idea of some of the countries that would follow was exciting. But I also felt like I was kind of missing Scotland a little. I had really loved Scotland. And I felt like I was ready for a bit of a break from the, unpacking, repacking, all of that. I was like, I think I want to go back to Scotland and see how it feels being in Scotland. So that was where I was at the time. And I think now, like, I would love to kind of go back to Croatia and continue on from there. But at the time, I was feeling ready to have still an adventure being in Scotland, but have a bit more quiet time. So I was like ready to end, but also definitely bittersweet.
So Sheelagh, fast forward, your trip's ended and you're back at home. And you've done this goal that you had for years. But it's not finished either, really, is it? And what I mean by that is you've discovered bike travel and you've fallen head over heels for it. Like full on into the bike world. I think you end up working as, helping out on bike tours. You work at a bike store. You've since set up like a YouTube channel to give your experiences and tips and stuff away to other people as well. Like you would have had no concept of this being the case before you set off on that first day in Edinburgh, right?
No, I barely got on the plane. The only reason I got on the plane was because I was like, you can go home if you don't want to. But so, yeah, I didn't know if I would fall in love with it. But yeah, I fell head over heels. I had a job that I needed to return to, and I wanted to see how that would feel. So I was like, I've had this great big experience. I love this. I want to keep doing this, but I've committed to headed back for this job. So why don't I go see how that feels? I know how this feels. Let's see how it feels to return to work after this great big adventure and go from there. And I got home and pretty quickly was quote unquote homesick for bike touring. But I got home in January of 2020. COVID hit March 2020.
The pandemic. The whole world shut down. Yeah.
Exactly. I had fallen in love with bike touring and travel, and it had my heart, but I hunkered down and just tried to get through it as best we all could. And I would say it was special in the sense that even though I wanted to be out on these big adventures, and there was a while there that we couldn't really travel at all, but as things started to open up, I started to do more Ontario trips, local trips. And that was really lovely too, because when I was in Europe, people would be hosting me and I'd be like, oh, if you ever come to Canada, come visit me. But like, you probably won't want to because the pretty parts of Canada are the West and the East and I live in Ontario. But then I got back and I started bike touring here and I was like, it is so beautiful here. And so it really let me experience, our forests and our lakes and the nature that we do have. And so, yeah, I had some really lovely, just kind of, week-long, couple of days, lots of little adventures around here. That was really great. And during that time, started working in a bike shop because I felt like I wanted to kind of build up more of that knowledge, especially mechanical knowledge. I was starting to make videos, but I felt like even though I had all these experiences and I could share my experiences, I didn't know that much about mechanics for myself or to help others. And so I thought, like, what better way to learn than in a bike shop where every time I think of a question, I have somebody who's been in the industry for 10, 15, 20 years who I could ask. So that was hugely helpful. Then as we were able to travel again, I was like, I'd love to get traveling, but I hadn't saved up quite enough to go out on another big adventure. And so I started working on bike tours, like supported bike tours, working on them as staff. And that was a great way to get to like experience different places that, you are still working. So there's a lot of work to be done, but you do get to have a bit of a sense of adventure and experience these places. And often fall in love with them and decide that you want to go back and do your own bike tour and see them more fully. So
Have you done that? Have you gone on your own bike tour somewhere where you worked as a guide?
I haven't yet, although a couple of years after my Europe tour, I worked on a bike tour that went to a lot of the places I had been on my solo bike tour. And that was super beautiful to like be back there and have all these like memories flood back. But last year, the year before, I did Southeast Asia. So Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. And I would love to go back there on my own tour. I think that's pretty high on my list for sure.
Oh, I would absolutely love to go touring through Southeast Asia. I think it would just be absolutely mega, mainly because I'm a food lover and I love the food there. Not just because of that. The people there are amazingly beautiful and kind. I've spoken to so many guests who tell me amazing stories about being there as well. And I think it's also every country has a different stark culture to it too. So everything is new. And so I'd be like a sponge on the bike of trying to absorb everything.
Yeah, big time.
We've spoken the majority of the show about taking adventures as a solo or on solo adventures, but you also took a trip through Turkey with your partner as well. And I'd love to know what it was like on that tour because, well, I have two questions. One, were you the one with all the bike touring experience then? So you're the person passing on the knowledge. And two, what's it like to go from solo adventures where you only have to make decisions for yourself to all of a sudden navigating an adventure as a couple where you're consulting with each other about what you're doing each and every day?
Yeah. So my partner didn't have any experience with bike touring, but he had a bike. He was interested in cycling and pretty quickly was keen on heading out on an adventure, which was so exciting for me. And so, yeah, we ended up going to Turkey. And I don't know if you've heard there's an expression that's basically like, whichever direction your relationship is heading, travel will make it go there faster. So like if you have a relationship where maybe you struggle with communication and maybe it's not a great fit, then you might find out faster when you're traveling. But if you have a strong relationship and good communication, travel will only make it stronger. And I certainly found that to be true because especially with bike touring, sometimes you're not at your best. You're hungry, you're thirsty, you're legitimately, you can be worried for your safety, right? You can be dealing with traffic or dangerous weather conditions. And so your brain really kicks into that fight or flight mode. And you're focused on like your basic survival. And so if you can be in that place and still like communicate and find your way through it together, I think there's something really incredible about that. And I think it only serves to strengthen things. And that's what I certainly found, is that it was a great opportunity for us to communicate better and to continue, approaching each other with kindness and compassion and really strengthen things. But it certainly is interesting. It's two very different experiences. With solo travel, I love the fact that I am totally self-reliant and I get this like huge, like empowering, like, wow, I can do all this myself. And like you said, you get to make all the decisions yourself. But with my partner, there's something really lovely about the fact that when I bike tour solo, I'd say I'm a little more alert. Like I'm always quite conscious and every decision is my own. And so I'm definitely very like alert. Whereas with my partner, I feel like I get to ease up, just relax a little more, feel a little more at ease because I have that comfort of him being there. And then there's something nice about getting to share some of those duties too. Not everything's on you. So I certainly love both experiences, but I'm so grateful that he took an interest in bike touring because it's been really lovely getting to share all those experiences. And kind of like you mentioned, the whole, when you're traveling solo, all the experiences are your own. Whereas when you're with your partner, like it's really cool to have a random day where you're like, hey, remember the time we were in that small town in Turkey and this and that happened? Like that's a really cool experience.
Yeah. It reminds me, there was a guest Jack Greenwood. Hi, Jack. Jack travelled through South America, and for many months of that tour was with one of his best mates. And he was saying this very thing, that I think they randomly do this to each other, where they just randomly send a photo and with no context. Here's the photo,
Yeah.
and they might be in it, and it might be somewhere. And then it was like, oh, I know exactly where that was. This was here, and we were doing this. And it is
Yeah.
cool being able to have something shared there as well. Turkey would have been an amazing place to experience as well culturally, because I feel like Turkey's at that crossroads, like, where it is the junction between Asia and Europe as well. It's often a definitive place for a lot of people who cycle across Europe to get to, as just that sort of milestone, but also it seems to be where everything gets vastly, vastly different as well. What was it like taking a tour just through there?
It was really incredible. As I think some other guests have said, and most people that I've heard who have biked through there have said, the hospitality is really, really incredible. Just so many kind people offering to share their chai or tea with us and chat with us. We spoke a few words of Turkish, but certainly not enough to get by. And most people there don't speak English, but we're so patient and just willing to gesture with us or use Google Translate or try to figure out how to communicate. So that was really beautiful. There's so much historical remnants there. Like, I feel like here in Canada, there'll be a building that was built in 1890, and there'll be a plaque next to it that's like, this building was built in 1890. And that's very cool. But when you're in Turkey, the fact that there'll just be these ancient rock homes built into the side of a cliff from, I don't know, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, there's no information because there's so much of it everywhere, and so much of it from different, backgrounds, and there's huge complexity there as well. But yeah, it's wild that you can just be biking down a road and see this incredible historical remnant, and you don't even know what it's from. And then the landscapes are incredible. So many different landscapes. We started in central Turkey, and went through the Taurus Mountains down to the coast. So yeah, starting in that kind of the central steppe, and there's not much trees or anything like that. It's kind of open expanse. And then going into kind of the gorgeous mountain ranges, and then down to the coast. And that was just a small part of it. Like, we would go back in a heartbeat to see more of it for sure.
Yeah. There's something else that you came up with, and it was in Turkey. I think it was when you were in Cappadocia you had mentioned this, but I imagine you could reflect back on this quote and think of many places where it would fit as well. And what you said there, Sheelagh, was, one of my favourite things about travelling by bike is that even in the most visited destinations, you can head off the beaten path and discover a special little spot all to yourself. Does that still resonate with you?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, because I think that is one of my favorite parts about bicycle travel, is that you have this means to transport yourself. It's faster than walking, but you're still out in the world. It's this really wonderful pace. And Cappadocia is one of the big destinations in Turkey, right? Because there's the beautiful hot air balloons. So like, everyone's going there. And to be able to kind of just get away from that hub and get to experience this beautiful landscape all on your own is so special. And I've found out throughout everywhere I've gone is those wonderful remote places that you're able to reach, that if you're doing kind of typical using a car or a bus or a train, you can't help but kind of speed past so much of this beauty and so many of these special experiences that you can only get when you're on a bike or walking and somebody stops you to talk to you or to offer you chai or to connect with you in some way. Yeah, just absolutely beautiful. It was a really special way to see a more kind of touristic area and to continue on from there and to leave that touristic area and to have so many beautiful experiences after that.
Yeah, and something you said there rings true about travel, and by no means is all my travel personally taken on a bicycle. It'd be my preferred way of travel, but it is one of those things, isn't it? Like I feel like I appreciate places more when I've arrived there under my own effort, and whether that's biking or hiking, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, whereas if I've arrived at an amazing place in a car, on a train, or a bus, whatever, it is almost like that you've arrived there, oh, okay, and then you see the thing and you go. But I feel like I savor the moments more when I've gotten there on my own steam. And like you said, just that the beautiful happenstance of something totally not something you could pre-plan happening. You're meeting a local who wants to talk to you because you're on a bike, and here's chai, or here's a melon, or something like that,
Yeah.
those kind of things as well, which, yeah, it is why bicycle travel is such a great thing for me as well. I really resonate with what you're saying there too. Well, I want to do something then, Sheelagh, which I've done with a lot of my guests recently, and that is I want to ask you to tell me and the listeners about one day of your trip. Now, you've taken many, many journeys, so I often think it's a hard question because you've got so many days to choose from. But whatever day and whatever's happened, it can be good, bad, wherever it fits on the emotional scale, and from any country, I want you to take me and the listeners there and tell me what happened on this day.
Oh, that's beautiful. What comes to mind for me is a day in Scotland where I was just a couple weeks into my bike tour. So it was still very new. I was still kind of getting a feel for everything. And I'd been following this kind of national cycle network. So I was following these bike routes, and I got to this section where there weren't any kind of bike routes, and I was trying to figure out where to go. And I stopped in at this kind of bunkhouse, which is like, it's like just a big room, like a big hostel room, often in like the Highlands of Scotland, where you're all kind of sleeping in the same room together. And I met these local hikers, and they said, well, if you haven't gone to Applecross, you should go there. It's absolutely beautiful. And they said it's a big climb, but it's really gorgeous. And so I was like, okay. And they were like, just so you know, it's like a big climb. Like, it's a really big climb. And I was like, okay. And so when I had headed over to do this trip, one of my biggest fears was mountain descents. That was my big fear. Was I had talked to a family member who had biked across Canada, and she had told me how scary the Rocky Mountains were. That, she was going down these hairpin turns, and there was trucks and cars like whipping past, and she felt like she could just be wiped out at any moment. And so I was so scared and certain that I was going to die. Again, absolutely certain. Death was imminent.
You've given your family members your last visits and everything. You were really prepped for this, weren't you?
I really take my anxiety to the next level. Like, it's like, how bad could it go? Really bad. I could be dead any moment. So I head off, and I see on the map, there's like a couple big climbs. And so I'm really anxious, and I get out there and I do these climbs, and they're tough, and the descents are kind of scary. And I'm like, wow, that wasn't so bad. It wasn't so scary. Like, good job, me. I go to sleep at a campground, and I wake up the next day. This is the day. So that was background. So for this day, I wake up so pleased with myself, having made it through these challenging climbs. And I meet this couple, and I'm having breakfast. And they're like, oh, which way are you going? And I was like, oh, I'm going that way. And they're like, oh, you got the big climb ahead of you today. And I was like, oh, no. I did the big climb yesterday. And they're like, if you're going that way, you definitely have the big climb today. And so I was like, oh, I see. So it turned out the climbs I had done were absolutely nothing. And I actually it's called the Sheelagh Daly.
I've heard of this. Yes,
Yeah.
I have a great friend. Hello, Alison. And she did. Sheelagh Daly. And
Yeah.
it's like a stupendously ridiculous. Like, is it the hardest climb in Scotland? And it's got like 20% plus gradients. And
Yes.
Wow. How excited am I about?
I love that. I love it. You know about it. It's called that they call like the greatest ascent in Britain. I don't know. They measure mountains by all these like different high above sea level, high roads. Anyway, Very big climb.
From memory, when I heard about it, it was because Alison was doing an event. And I think one of the biggest deals about this event was, I think it was on closed roads, potentially, if I'm remembering correctly. But it was also an opportunity to do like the hardest climb in Scotland or something like that.
Okay, so yeah, there you go. That's what I didn't know I was signing up for. And so I headed off. And again, right, I have like 50 pounds of gear on my bike. I do not have low gearing at all. And so I'm just kind of inching my way up these climbs. Like, I don't even think my knees could handle it anymore. Like, how slow I was just like rotating the pedals. And I think the climb up is only 6 kilometers, but it probably took me like 2.5 hours. I was just like doing it all morning. And the car drivers were so sweet. Everyone was like cheering me on. And so I finally make it to the top, made it past those 20% gradients. And I get to the top and I get this beautiful view of, you know, the mountains in the distance and the water. And I guess apparently often, because it rains so much in Scotland.
No, are you kidding? It rains in Scotland?
Yeah. So I got this like beautiful view that like you don't always get. And then I was like, okay, it's time to do this descent. And, you know, slightly convinced I was going to die. But I was like, you know what? Just go slow, take your time. And I start going down this climb. And it's absolutely beautiful. You know, there's like these big mountains on either side. And you're just kind of zigzagging your way through them. And it just feels like you're being like funneled through this gorgeous mountain. And I just took my time, and like, because my brakes weren't the strongest with how much gear I was carrying, like I would stop every once in a while, like stretch out my hands. And they had like little pull-off points so you could take a little moment. And I just took my time on the hairpins and just had way more joy than fear. And so I'm just going down this mountain, and I feel like my confidence was increasing with every kind of kilometer. I was just like, I'm doing this, I'm really doing this. And I got to the bottom, and I found a little cafe, and I had, you know, a little coffee and a treat. And then I continued on to this little bunkhouse. And I met some guys that had just graduated from university, and so they were celebrating, and I hung out with them. And it was just this moment that even though, you know, I had been on the road for a couple weeks, I really feel, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm getting emotional, like I'm like getting transported back there. It was just this moment that I had this first realization that I was like, I can do this. Like I can actually do this. Like I conquered one of my biggest fears, which was these mountain passes. I did it. I made it. I kept myself safe. And it was just this huge confidence boost. And even though since, you know, I've done, you know, tougher challenges and scarier things and whatever, but like that moment was just this beautiful moment that I was like, wow, I love this and I can do this. And that feeling has stayed with me ever since.
It's like really self-affirming there, isn't it? Just,
yeah.
You know how at the very start of the show you were saying you took up triathlon and it helped remind you to show you what you were capable of? It's almost like you needed this really hard climb of Balachnabar and then the descent to follow to show you what you were capable of again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to go to Scotland and ride my bike with Alison. So maybe I need to set myself the challenge of Balachnabar. I'm like you though. I wouldn't be so. I have a bike with good gears and it would hurt, but I could get to the top even with a loaded bike. I think it would be the descent that would do my head in all the way up the top. I don't know. Does that resonate with you? Like I often am riding up roads, and if it's an out and back, think, oh, I don't know how I'm going to go down this. And
that is the hard thing, right? Because like with each moment that you get yourself higher up, you're like, I still have to come down this.
Yeah.
But I think that
on a loaded bike.
I know. I think like a big part of that tour though is that the fact that I had so many fears, but there was just this little spark in me that was like, I want to do this thing, and I'm not going to not do it because of the fear of what could happen. You know, I'm going to take all these steps to try to keep myself as safe as possible, and then I'm going to go do it. And, I only get this one life. So I'm not going to sit at home having these escape dreams forever. I'm going to go and I'm going to try and I'm going to see how it feels. And so that's what I had to do.
And you've continued to do it and you're still doing it and you've probably got plans to keep doing it even ever more. Listeners, as I mentioned during the show, Sheelagh has a YouTube channel where she's sharing a lot of these experiences that she's had with people for the very fact of helping others to do things as well and get into the idea of bikepacking, bike touring, slow travel. Sheelagh, if people want to find out more, where can they find out more? What is your YouTube channel called? Where else are you on social media?
Yeah, so I have my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Sheelagh Daly. I'll spell that since I have a tricky spelling. It's SheelagHDaly. And then I'm also on Instagram, same spelling, Sheelagh.Daly.
Awesome. And listeners, I will provide links as ever in the show notes for you to be able to check out Sheelagh's adventures. If you're like me, you'll enjoy trawling through her Instagram as well because there's a lot of beautiful pictures that go along with your journeys too. In fact, I'm going to trawl through and see if I can find any from Balaknabar. If you've got any, you've got to send them to me.
I will,
that would be
sure,
amazing.
Yeah.
And your YouTube channel is really, really informative too. I certainly have enjoyed watching your clips there as well. And you present with a really cool, energetic style, which I definitely vibe with.
Aw, thank you. That means a lot.
Well, unfortunately, it is time to wrap things up. I feel like I could chat and laugh with you for ages. Then, one day I always say I have to have some sort of bike touring festival. We have a bike tour and we have campfire chats. And you would be very welcome sat at the log next to me in front of the campfire chatting, Sheelagh.
I would love that.
But as I bring it to the close, 3 questions I ask every single guest. The first one is, if you had to pick a song to be the soundtrack to your bike adventures, what song would you pick? And Sheelagh, your song will go on the Seek Travel Ride music playlist, which is available on Apple, Spotify, and most recently YouTube Music as well.
Ooh. So I'm going to pick called More Reels by the Rogues. Yeah, I apologize in advance to anyone who doesn't like bagpipes, but I really feel like if you give it a try, it has this incredible vibe and beat that every time I'm on the bike and I'm just slogging along and I'm like, I can't keep going, I'm too tired. I put that song on and my legs just like lock into beat with it and it just like brings the vibe right up, right back. So yeah, I hope people will give it a try and that it helps them on those tough days.
Sweet. Okay. More Reels by the Rogues. You are there. You're given a choice one day. You can go in one direction, which will be forever up a constant, never-ending, leg-breaking, knee-crunching climb, or you go in the other direction and you are on a flat road but into a constant, never-ending headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
I love how hard you made that climb sound, but I'm still going to choose the climb.
I need to stop being biased to the poor climb because I'm a hill climber, but I'm trying to get more people to choose headwinds.
No, I know. I love listening, and I'm always curious if somebody's going to pick the headwind. But I climb, obviously the climb gives you the views, and then also the climb, it's like if you want to rest, you can sit down, whereas those headwinds, it's like sometimes you're just like, I just want to have a snack, and I'm getting blown over.
Oh, I just want to hear my own thoughts and I can't even hear. Yeah,
exactly.
What was the country you had the worst headwind in? Was that Scotland as well?
Oh, no, that would actually be France.
Oh,
yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah, we got in some headwinds last year in southern France.
I wonder if it was the Mistral.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's brutal. I've had that headwind. Oh no, it's nasty. I had it on the ride towards Avignon. Yeah, I had to contemplate life choices many times that day.
We did at least get blessed one time when we were coming south along the Via Rona. There was one day, I think coming into Avignon, that we got tailwinds, and it was just like I was barely biking, and that was thrilling. But then we got hit pretty hard the next days as we were going west.
I didn't have the tailwind. I had the horrendous headwind. So
Oh.
maybe it was on the same section of road. Yeah, that was gnarly.
Yeah.
Final question for you, Sheelagh. You're given a choice one day. You're going to be riding a bike. It's only for 4 hours. Are you going to choose to ride that bike on your own, or do you want to ride it with other people?
You know what? I could so happily do either, but I think right now at this little point in my journey, I think I would say solo because I started solo and I've been riding with my partner, which I love. But yeah, I'm feeling lately like I need to cultivate a bit more of that solo independence again. So I went on an overnighter last month or so, and I think I need a little more solo time to just build those skills again.
Oh, awesome. I think that's a total valid reason. I think you definitely come across as the sort of person that whatever the scenario was, you would enjoy it.
I do try to always, yeah, for sure.
Well, Sheelagh Daly, it has been an absolute pleasure to swap stories, to hear more about your experiences and learn about how you have fallen so deeply into the world of bike travel. I've definitely picked up a few things from you and things that I'm going to take on board as well. That idea of doing the thing that maybe scares you, doing it anyway, but also allowing yourself to do what you need to do for you, to be in the best place for yourself as well. I love the idea that you've said it many times along here, that you've sort of done self-check-ins with yourself at many periods on your travels. Whenever you felt at an unease, you've always sort of stopped yourself, had a check-in and thought, what do I need to do to feel great again? Or also sometimes just the whole harden up, you're in this situation and you've got to get yourself out as well. I do love that. I especially love that you're continuing to share your experiences and help others get into the sport as well. I think that is fantastic. But most of all, I've just really enjoyed the hit of wanderlust that you have given me, as I've heard so many stories about your adventures. Thank you so, so much for sharing your stories and experiences here on the podcast for us all at Seek Travel Ride.
Thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Listeners, this happens each and every time I record an episode with a guest. Speaking with Sheelagh there has just got me so excited to pack stuff on my bike and go away on a journey. Perhaps it's a solo journey, perhaps it's not. Maybe I'll wild camp, maybe I won't. But I'm going to take a few little things there that Sheelagh spoke about with me on board and pack them into my panniers. And that is just to embrace what's happening, allow myself to be flexible enough to change my plans if I need to, and to do the right thing for me on this tour. But overwhelmingly, what really came across there in my interview with Sheelagh is just how much she really draws so much energy from bike traveling and from seeing places on a bicycle. I'm so glad that she managed to make that year-long goal of hers a reality, that trip from Scotland all the way to Croatia. And I'm excited to see where her journey will take her from now as well. Definitely keep an eye on her socials and let's see where Sheelagh goes to and where her two wheels will take her next. If you are enjoying Seek Travel Ride and you'd like to help this podcaster out at all, you can click the link on Buy Me a Coffee. That just helps show a little bit of appreciation for the show that I'm putting together for you each and every week, helps keep my microphone on and goes towards the running costs of producing the podcast as well. I really love seeing all the support that you are giving me, and I appreciate each and every one of you who has bought me a copy so far. I have included the link in the show note, so it's pretty easy. Buy me a coffee, give me a hit of caffeine, and let's keep this show going. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.